This is the Weather Lounge here at WeatherWorks.
Hello and welcome to the Weather Lounge. I am your host, Meteorologist Mike Mahalik, and thank you for listening to our podcast about, you guessed it, the weather. Our company is called WeatherWorks, and we're located in Hackettstown, New Jersey. And joining me today is Jim Sullivan. He's our chief meteorologist here at WeatherWorks, and he's also our long-range expert. So we're going to discuss with him today about the past winter. What went right? What didn't go so right with the forecast? We'll discuss the pattern and what led to the winter season and all the storminess that came in February throughout the Midwest and the Northeast. And, we have a lot to talk about with Jim. So rather than me just blabbering on and on and on, we'll go to a real quick break and we'll be back right after this with meteorologist Jim Sullivan.
Have you ever needed weather data for a snow removal contract? How about a slip and fall incident? Searching for the information online may sound simple enough, however, it can be tedious and difficult. Good news! Our data and stats team can simplify the process. We'll find any weather information from daily rainfall and snowfall totals to hourly temperatures and seasonal averages. On the legal side, our forensic department routinely produces certified reports by meteorologists, assessing the weather conditions on and around accident dates. So don't waste your valuable time. Give WeatherWorks a call today at 908-850-8600 or email us at data@weatherworksinc.com. Remember, when you think weather, think WeatherWorks.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Weather Lounge. I am meteorologist Mike Mahalik. Once again, I'm your host. I am only here by myself. I'm missing my co-host, meteorologist Brad Miller, but he'll be with us in the next podcast. But either way, I do have a guest today, and it is our chief meteorologist, Jim Sullivan. Jim, how you doing today?
Mike, I'm all right. I guess we'll see if the two of us can do just as well as you and Brad do.
Maybe it'll be even better with Brad and without Brad, I should say. And then
I won't tell him you said that.
Well, now that all of our listeners know, they'll be all like, "Wait a minute, we love Brad. What are you talking about?" No, I mean, I thought I'd bring you on, Jim, and kind of discuss how the winter season went here.
Yeah.
And we started out in actually early in fall with some early calls on the winter forecast. I mean, I think the first one is somewhere in August, and then there's one in September, and then our final in the middle of October.
Exactly. Yeah. We're only like three or so months away from starting the process for next winter, but we'll enjoy these.
Why do you have to bring that up?
Well, I was about to say we'll enjoy these 3 months or so of bliss while we have them. But yeah, it's always something winter here at WeatherWorks, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, WeatherWorks deals a lot with snow and ice removal clients, so winter is a big deal over here. So, we get started right away in August, starting to look at that upcoming winter, and Jim over there kindly analyzes everything for us and does a really good job at it too. So Jim, let's go through it a little bit. We'll start with the October forecast, our final winter forecast. What were the players on the field there? What were you seeing? And how did you expect it to play out?
Yeah, so the big players on the field when we put out that October forecast, the biggest was La Nina, cooler water across the tropical Pacific, which can lead to certain patterns through winter. And when there's a La Nina, typically cold air dives into the north central United States, like the northern Rockies, the plains, with more mild conditions from the deep south into the southeast and sometimes up the east coast. So that was the big player, and which on its own would probably give a milder winter to, say, the Mid-Atlantic, maybe the Ohio Valley. But the big question was, would we get what we call blocking, which is when the jet stream kind of backs up and can allow some colder air to come south and for some stormier conditions. And it was the kind of mixed signals. We thought maybe there would be some blocking at times, and the trick kind of was, would there be that blocking that could bring us some colder weather?
Yeah, I mean that's the tough one, right? The blocking. I mean, La Nina, we could see, coming. We have models showing that pretty well. You can watch the sea surface anomalies in the Pacific, but the blocking that's got to be one of the tougher things that you are trying to forecast here for the winter.
It is, and individual blocking episodes are very hard to predict more than 2, maybe 3 weeks in advance. So when we're heading into winter, we're just kind of looking for, is it generally favorable for blocking to occur or not? And last winter, at least heading into it in October, the signals were mixed. And the big wild card was, what would the polar vortex in the stratosphere do? And that certainly changed up in December and January and led to our more active stretch of weather later in winter.
Hmm. Yeah, so I mean, let's go into it a little bit. Let's go through the season. Let's go through the pattern. So we started out, well, a little bit. I have a note here saying we started out kind of slow, but actually, it seems like,
Depends on where you were, right?
yeah, I mean, in the Northeast here, we had some snow near Halloween. And Jim, I don't know
Exactly.
what it is about Halloween,
Hmm.
but it seems like almost every year recently, we've had something to contend with here in the Northeast around Halloween, whether it's a snowstorm or whether it's something like Sandy or whatever. I don't know what's going on, Jim. Can we fix this or 'cause-
Yeah, the seasons are changing around Halloween, that's for sure. So, you kind of go from the warmer, quieter weather of this. I don't want to say quieter weather in the summer, but usually in summer we don't get big weather systems that cover half the United States. We get much more localized disturbances, whereas heading into winter it does get much more active and stormy. So yeah, I guess Halloween is kind of right in the middle of that transition period. It's getting colder to the north, summer's still hanging on to the south, and some interesting things can happen. But yeah, this year really depends on where you were. But yeah, a lot of the Northeast did see some accumulating snow the Friday before Halloween. Even the hills in northern New Jersey got coated up with snow, and Boston got like 4 inches or so of snow. It was
Sure
their
did.
snowiest October on record, I believe, in the city of Boston.
Yeah, and that was certainly an interesting setup there. We had the remnants of Zeta moving
Right.
through. And, I believe there was a secondary low that
It
developed.
was a secondary low that actually brought the snow, because Zeta went through like 12 to 24 hours, I think, before the snow, but then another low pressure developed right behind it, and that brought the snow because the cold air came in with it.
Mm, gotcha. Well, fortunately, other than the secondary low behind Zeta, there wasn't a whole lot of snow in
Right.
October. I mean, there was just a few flurries around Chicago, a couple of coatings, that sort of thing. Nothing crazy. And then we hit November, and man, it was quite mild. Um,
Yeah. I guess, yeah, the thing with this winter was when we had that favorable blocking for those few weeks from later in January through February. It was active, it was colder, but outside of that, yeah, there were some quiet stretches. So you can kind of see like that mixed influence I sort of hinted at the beginning of the episode here, between the La Nina and the blocking.
so I believe initially we were thinking that it'd be a little bit more snowy, a little bit colder in November and December.
Right.
So December did get more active for sure. We did have more snow.
But it wasn't
Um,
particularly cold, right?
no, no. So what went on there?
Yeah, so we actually, so La Nina gives us a kind of seasonal pattern that, over the course of the season, it often averages out to that pattern I referenced, where it's colder over the northwestern, north central United States, warmer farther south and east. And over the course of the season, that's how it often averages out. But you can still get like maybe a few weeks at a time where it differs from that. And that happened in November and December. What happened was the Pacific jet stream got very, very strong because it was very stormy near Alaska, and that just kind of directed the jet stream straight into the west coast. And our cold air does not come from the Pacific Ocean. It comes from up towards the North Pole. So if we're getting that jet stream blasting right into the West Coast, it tends to be a milder pattern. So that pattern, yeah, that was there for most of November, December, even into early January. And that limited how much cold air we had. But it was an active pattern. So when we got a little bit of cold air around the middle of December, the very active pattern was able to produce a pretty notable nor'easter, probably the biggest one in a couple of years, I'd say, in terms of how widespread it was in the middle of December.
Yeah, I was gonna say because December wasn't actually, that cold. It was actually above normal.
It was a little warmer than normal. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
But was that just a timing thing with the mid-December storm that, I mean, it pretty much, hit most of the Northeast. I mean, it slammed Binghamton, New York, upstate New York with, I don't know what it was, over 40 inches
It
or
was
something,
over
right?
40 inches. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. And yeah, even the bigger cities, Philadelphia got a lot of mixed precipitation out of that storm, but they also got 6 inches of snow. New York City got 10 inches. Boston and Hartford both got a little over a foot. So yeah, it was a pretty big widespread storm. And yeah, like you said, it wasn't all that cold, but it was cold enough. And it was definitely a timing thing because it got really mild towards the holidays, and it was just cold enough around the middle of the month that one bigger storm kind of took advantage of the cold air, especially kind of along and northwest of 95.
And I think that's something that many out there have to consider is like, look, even though we're above normal in winter months, it's still quite cold.
It's not a warm time of year, right?
Right. So it's when we say above normal temperatures, maybe some people get the idea of, oh, it's going to be 50, 60 degrees or something like that, but that's like way up there.
Right. Like, if you're and average lows, once they're below freezing, you can have actually an above normal low temperature and still get snow in winter. So, yeah, once you get closer to the heart of winter, like, yeah, if you're in the fringe months, say November or March, you definitely need some at least average, if not colder than average air to get, any legitimate snow here on the East Coast. But yeah, once you're December, January, February, as long as it's not, like you kind of said, like a quote unquote blowtorch, as we affectionately call it, where temperatures are, 50, 60 plus degrees, it, might still be workable.
Right, sure. But I mean, yeah, I mean that was the big storm of the month there, that's for sure. I mean,
Honestly, yeah, big storm of the first half of the winter, really, because, man, outside of that, it barely snowed until pretty much the
yeah,
end of January.
I was gonna say there wasn't a lot of snow, but even the Midwest, they had some events in December, but it didn't seem like anything was that crazy. Yes, they had some more frequent snow
They
through the
were
first
all
half.
very small events out
Yeah,
there.
yeah, and it wasn't crazy. But one thing I gotta say about that storm that happened in December, it was amazing how far inland that heaviest snow band went. I mean, I rem it was and the intensity of it was so impressive. I remember seeing a couple of observations coming out of the Binghamton area from an NWS employee that was saying 4 inch an hour rates,
Yeah.
and they already had 20 inches of snow on the ground. And I'm going, oh no, and that band was not moving very fast.
And yeah, and it got Binghamton, it started kind of like north of State College, got Binghamton, got Albany pretty good. I think they got close to 2 feet, and then it continued all the way into parts of Vermont and New Hampshire. So it was a big area that got a lot of snow. And then yeah, enough to plow and be significant all the way down to 95. So big area affected.
Yeah, I mean that storm was quite impressive, and like I said, I mean how far inland? I mean, to me that seemed a little bit anomalous that that band was that far inland to me. Did it seem that way to you in your
It
experience?
was it was definitely farther inland than the computer models we look at said it would be. Even a day or so out, they were saying like, oh, it might be more like the Lehigh Valley, northern Jersey, towards like Boston, but it was like again, close to 100 miles, even farther northwest than the models had it, like less than 24 hours out. So it definitely ended up more inland than expected. Yeah, I think it was just because it was such a strong and strengthening system that those have a way to end up pushing the heaviest snow a little bit farther inland. Even though, a few days ahead of time it looked good for 95. And I don't want to say it didn't snow along I-95 because, again, Philly and New York City, that was their biggest storm at that point in 3 winters since the 17-18 winter. So it was pretty notable, even if the heaviest snow ended up way inland.
Right. And just for everybody out there listening, before we get too far into this, our main forecast area here at WeatherWorks is basically from the Midwest around Chicago, through Indianapolis, through Ohio, and into the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. So if we don't talk a whole lot about, I don't know, Tennessee or Colorado or Minnesota, well, that's kind of why. Um, just so you know, that's why we're focusing on the northeast quarter of the country. But we do have certified snowfall totals that cover the entire country. So we do not, limit ourselves in that way in any form. But back to the forecast, Jim, we started warming up around the holidays, around Christmas. And then, we headed into January. And, to be honest, it wasn't a whole lot happening to start out January either.
Yeah, so the pieces that kind of gave us the colder, snowier second half of winter, really it was just a 4 or so week period, but the pieces that gave us that were in motion by January. In fact, they were kind of in motion November and December, but very slow evolving process. So I guess I don't know, Mike, is now the time to talk about the polar vortex, the stratospheric warming event, because that's kind of what turned winter around.
Right. So, I mean, we certainly can. I just wouldn't want to hit back at our original forecast. Back in January, we had a January and February forecast that was saying, temperatures were going to be a little bit milder than normal, and the snow was going to be a little bit less than normal, was our original forecast. And then we did a midwinter update, which is something we're going to be doing regularly. We did one back in 2020 also, 2019-20. This year we had the scheduled update around mid-January. And, you know, what were we looking at this point? What were the changes? Because some people were kind of thinking, well, hey, we had that decent storm in December. Not a lot's been happening so far. What's going on? A lot of times, the hey, is winter over? Start popping out. Even even in the January, when we're having January thaws, people are sometimes asking us those questions. So let's go through it, Jim. What do we start seeing with this midwinter update?
Yeah, so I guess by the time we sent out that midwinter update, we had a pretty good idea when the blocking that was kind of uncertain in October, when or even if it would occur with those mixed signals. By mid January, stuff was in motion. You know how I said a little earlier, individual blocking episodes are maybe predictable 2 or 3 weeks out. Well, the blocking was starting to develop in mid January. And at that point, we could kind of see like blocking's developing. Stuff had happened that we'll get to here in a few minutes that kind of led to confidence that the blocking would persist for at least a few weeks. So at that point in mid January, we kind of knew like, hey, over the next 2 weeks, we're really going to start turning colder, more active. And we also kind of knew that it's probably going to last a few weeks before maybe relaxing into March.
hmm Yeah, and I mean, really, once we got towards late January, this setup really started to take place, right?
Right. It happened quick. We had a little event, I want to say, right around January 25th, brought some mixed precipitation to a lot of the East Coast, also brought a fair amount of snow to the Midwest. They started getting active, I want to say, a week or so before the East Coast did. So I think Chicago, it really started picking up around mid January, whereas on the East Coast, it was more the last week of the month because we had that little event, I want to say, about January 25th, somewhere around there. And then we had a big nor'easter, started January 31st, and oh gosh, continued until February 2nd or 3rd. It was a long one.
Yeah, that's for sure. And that not only affected the Northeast too. The out towards Chicago also had plenty of snow.
That was a big, juicy, for lack of a better term, west to east moving system. It dropped, yeah, heavy snow from the Midwest. Chicago got a lot. I mean, the I-70 corridor, Indianapolis, Columbus, they got several inches. So Pittsburgh got a lot of snow too. And then, yeah, it redeveloped off the East Coast, and there was a lot of blocking near Greenland, which slows the whole jet stream down right on the East Coast. So that blocking caused that storm to just stall pretty much right off the Jersey coast.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it dumped a lot of snow for a long time.
Yeah, that's for sure. I remember seeing some of the computer guidance ahead of this storm, and people were texting me and saying like, "Well, looks like you're in the bullseye in eastern Pennsylvania," and I had like, I don't know, a 55-inch spot sitting over me, and I'm going, "Get out of here!" Like, what are you talking about?
Now, you didn't quite get 55.
No, but it was probably 30.
Yeah. Are
um,
you saying that it was big enough despite
yeah,
not quite being 55 inches?
yeah, it was definitely the biggest storm I've seen in a long time. Probably since what was it, the 2016 storm in
2016, yeah.
January.
And I gotta say, I think, originally from Cleveland, I've seen 30, 40 inches of lake effect snow from one event, but drawn out over several days. This was about 30 inches roughly, and most of it fell in a day. So it's definitely the most snow I think I've ever seen at once. And it blew around a lot too. It was quite a sight, that's for sure.
Yeah, those the big nor'easters are always what we're looking for here on the Northeast, especially for the snow lovers. That's for sure. Um,
And we do like snow.
yeah, Jim, you talked a lot about blocking and all the blocking that was setting up ahead of this big storm in early February. Um, a lot of people talk about the NAO, which is a North Atlantic Oscillation, or the Arctic Oscillation, which is the AO. Can you kind of explain that a little bit for our listeners? Because I think there's still some confusion or uncertainty about what these things actually are. What does this blocking mean?
Yeah, so blocking, it literally, it is actually kind of an intuitive term, for one. Sometimes we come up with terms that aren't intuitive, and makes it harder to explain. But yeah, what blocking is when there's literally what we call a ridge in the jet stream, where that's where the jet stream goes, basically has to go around the ridge. Because the atmosphere is literally thicker where that ridge is than surrounding areas. So the jet stream runs into that ridge, it backs up, it has to go around it, and it buckles. So the NAO, or North Atlantic Oscillation, is when there is a ridge in the jet stream centered somewhere near Greenland. And when there's a ridge near Greenland, the jet stream backs up and buckles behind it, which is pretty much the east coast of the United States. So when you have a negative NAO, the jet stream tends to buckle near the east coast, which keeps us colder. And also, if there is a storm, which there was at the beginning of February, make sure it's slow moving. So instead of maybe zipping on by and dropping a few inches, it sat there for a couple of days and dropped a few feet. So that's the negative NAO. The Arctic Oscillation, or AO, that you mentioned, that's a more broad term. That's just when there is a ridge in the jet stream somewhere in the high latitudes. So the AO has a much larger domain, if you will. So a negative NAO definitely favors East Coast cold and snow. The negative AO definitely encourages cold and snow both along the East Coast, but really anywhere in the mid latitudes. So so if you're saying Chicago, a negative NAO may not help you as much as it does on the East Coast, but a negative AO still signals at least an increased risk for cold weather there.
Right. And, even with the jet stream, talking about the jet stream, and basically we're talking about, the pretty much upper level winds, and a lot of times the storms are, um,
They're driven by the jet stream and
right.
fueled by the jet stream. So if the jet stream is slower and kind of wavier or buckling, as I say, you tend to get bigger storms that are slower moving than if the jet stream is just no blocking and it just is zipping on by west to east.
Right. Yeah, and that's those are kind of the instances where you might get those Alberta clippers or something like that that just kind of fly off, from the Midwest into the East Coast. They drop a couple of inches, and that's about it.
Exactly. And usually if you have a jet stream like that, if it gets cold, it doesn't stay cold. Whereas if we have the blocking, everything's slower moving. So if it gets cold, you're more likely to stay cold.
Yeah. So in February, it wasn't just the one storm.
It
I
was
mean,
busy.
it was quite busy. A lot of us here at WeatherWorks, a lot of our forecasters were having full 12-hour days. It seemed like almost every several days we were getting in there for a long shift.
I mean, it seemed, yeah, there was like, I want to say, yeah, it was a 4 or 5 week stretch where I feel like every week had multiple pretty notable events somewhere where we forecast for. Um, Yeah, so I guess kind of what happened was that blocking stayed in place. And the blocking really did start developing in January, which is why like the Midwest, like Chicago, started picking up a little bit earlier than we did. It just took a little bit longer for the cold air to make its way to the East Coast. So yeah, it developed in January, stayed in place through most of February. And what happened was, you know how I mentioned in December, even into early January, we kind of had that alteration to the La Nina pattern where it was very mild across the western and central United States. Well, that alteration went away through the month of January and into February, and it started getting much colder in the central United States. And that kind of explains why Texas got so cold there briefly with their record cold snap. So yeah, we got into a much more typical La Nina pattern where it was very cold over the central United States. There was a little bit of a southeast ridge. If you think back, like places like the Carolinas, Georgia, they did not get much snow. And you don't think of them as places that get snow, but they can, and they didn't despite the blocking. And that was because there was that southeast ridge, which kept them milder despite all the blocking. So you have the southeast ridge, you have cold over the central United States, and that puts a nice corridor where we're up and down, right on the gradient from the Ohio Valley through the mid Atlantic into New England. And storms just kind of kept zipping right along that gradient for a few weeks.
Yeah, and for a while, like we said, it was one after the other. I know there was even a storm in Cincinnati on the 8th to 9th, dropped over 8 inches of snow. Chicago got pummeled by lake effect snow.
Yeah, Chicago went from, in the middle of January, way below average to a snowier than average winter. And it almost all happened in like a 5 or 6 week stretch.
Yeah, I mean, I think downtown reported something like 17 inches
Yeah,
in that event.
that was
So
a crazy storm because usually lake effect snow occurs on the other side of the lake because usually the winds are west to east. But there was a northeast wind, which gosh, for all the years I've kind of been following Chicago weather, we'll say it's maybe a solid 10 or so years that I've been paying close enough to attention to remember. Biggest lake effect event I can remember on that side of Lake Michigan.
yeah, I would tend to agree. I remember, way back in the late 2000s, I think I did a certified snowfall totals report for Chicago, who had a pretty good lake effect band, but I think it was only like something like 8 inches, 9 inches tops.
Only 8 or 9 inches.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Well, for lake effect in Chicago, it was pretty impressive.
But yeah, compared to 17, 18 inches, whatever this one was, yeah.
And there might have been some lake influence in the Groundhog Day storm back in 2011.
Right. That is kind of a little more common where they get a big snowstorm on its own and then the lake adds maybe a few inches. That happens a little more commonly, but yeah, an event like this where there was a little bit of quote unquote system snow, but I think without the lake influence, it might have been like a 2 inch snow event because places not far from Chicago, like Rockford, they only got a couple inches out of that. And then, yeah, where the lake effect was, it was a foot and a half. So the lake added a lot in this instance.
Right. So we finally got a below average temperature for the month of February for many locations, but it wasn't by a whole lot.
Right. That's the thing. Like we're it's easily the most active winter I've been at WeatherWorks for. Again, I've only been here for a few full time in office. So most active winter I've personally been here for, but yeah, you think back, November, warmer than average by quite a bit. December, got a nice snow event, which was good. We needed it after last winter was so quiet. I know not everyone wants snow, but a lot of the people we forecast for, they needed to snow a little bit. So it was good that we got that in December, but December was even a couple degrees warmer than normal. So not super warm, but a little mild. And then yeah, January was definitely mild, although it started turning late. And then February, finally a chilly month before March was mild again.
Yeah. And in February, I mean, we did have that the polar vortex break up a little bit, right?
Right. So yeah, what drove all this blocking? I mentioned like by the time we sent out that mid-January update, we knew that blocking was developing and that it would last, and we knew that because of what the polar vortex was doing. So yeah, when I say polar vortex, we're talking about the level of the atmosphere we live in and where pretty much all of our weather occurs is called the troposphere. And that's like the lowest, 35 or 40,000 feet. And then the next level is the stratosphere. And that's where the polar vortex that we're talking about lives in winter. It's there every year, not an uncommon feature. It's there every winter. The winter of 2019 2020, that polar vortex was very, very strong, which encouraged a lack of blocking, a west to east jet stream, smaller systems, milder weather, and it barely snowed in the mid Atlantic because of that. And then this winter, the polar vortex started kind of strong in November, but then it started weakening in December and it broke apart in January. And it's a few week process for it to break up and then potentially impact our weather. So it broke up kind of in early January, and we started feeling the effects by late January, and they lasted through February.
Right. It's interesting how there's that big lag between it breaking up and actually getting some cold air to flow into the North America there.
And it's because yeah, typically the stratosphere doesn't directly affect our weather. The only time it really can is from late fall through early spring. And it's kind of an indirect effect, but if there is a significant disturbance like we had this winter, or if it's really strong like it was in the winter of 1920, it can have a rather prolonged effect.
Right, for sure. And when it does break up, it doesn't mean that the cold air has to go into North America. It can easily go into Europe.
Europe, right? A lot of times, a lot of times it does. A lot of times it goes into both Europe and North America, and we saw that this year. Like because the winter of 1920 was, I want to say, it was easily the warmest on record in a lot of Western Europe, like the United Kingdom, France, into Scandinavia, like Sweden. This winter, they actually got cold and got snow on the other side of the pond, and it actually started there a couple weeks before it started here, which is common. A lot of times it will dump into Europe first if we get a polar vortex breakup like we had this winter. So yeah, dumped cold into Europe, and for those who like snow, thankfully it did eventually dump into North America.
Why, sure. But then, hey, we had the active February, everybody was scrambling, we were super busy. But then it seemed like when we hit March, all of a sudden, what happened? It,
Well,
it just stopped snowing and got warm again.
it really did just stop. Yeah, the polar vortex pulled itself back together, and the blocking that was around went away. To make it really simple, which is typical because usually if we do get blocking from a polar vortex breakup, it lasts 1 to 2 months after the breakup, and it lasted like 6 or so weeks. I want to say, about mid-January through most of February. So now that was kind of right on target for it to kind of warm back up. Now, sometimes it's a more gradual progression from a cold and snowy pattern to something milder. It did happen very quick, and I think this winter kind of underscores the concerns we had heading into the season that if we didn't have blocking, it would have been a really, really mild winter. Because all the months where we didn't have blocking, like between November and March, 4 of the 5 months were warmer than normal here on the East Coast, and some of them by a lot. So, it's a good thing we got the blocking when we did. It happened kind of right when you expect the most snow, mid January and through February, because December it can snow, but it's a little bit early, especially like farther south. Kind of January, February are your biggest months, especially in a spot like DC. So blocking kind of happened at the right time, gave us a few weeks of winter, and then when it went away, the concerns for milder weather kind of reared their head.
Yeah. I mean, hey, in all honesty, though, that stretch in February, I don't know if I've seen it snow so often in my backyard,
It
basically.
was yeah, it was impressive again. One thing my first couple winters in Jersey before this one that I noticed was, you can go a long time without snow. I was not used to that being from Cleveland, where you just get a chilly wind across the lake and it snows. We don't have that here on the East Coast.
No, no, you get a couple of flurries from the lakes, maybe a snow squall or two if you get lucky, but
Yeah. So February definitely kind of reminded me of a Midwest winter where it just snows. And we kicked it off with a huge storm, which I think burned a lot of people out to lead off the
well,
stretch.
look, I was very happy to have my snowblower. I got a system down now where I know exactly what I'm doing because I've did it so many times this winter. But so I'm grateful for that. Now I have a nice system. I get done real quick. Before I didn't know because we weren't getting a whole lot of snow. So I'm like, oh no, what do I do with this 6 inches? Like where?
What are you like, going like diagonal or something? Or now, you're just going straight lines, or no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it was just, where to go with it. Do I blow it over here or do I, throw the snow over there? Which way do I go? But now I got a good system. It's like mowing the grass now. So just go back and forth, back and forth. I got it. But yeah, so we had the break in March. There wasn't a whole lot going on. It was warm, and then just to bookend the year, with the a little bit of snow in October, and then now it's April, and everybody wants spring, but it snowed.
Not quite. Yeah. So yeah, basically what happened was, the polar vortex broke down for good in April, and there was a little bit more blocking in two spots near Greenland again, where we had it at times in December, January, and February. It returned there in April, and also near Alaska, where it the Alaskan blocking is so the Greenland blocking can give us East Coast snowstorms. It's a very good pattern for nor'easters. It's the blocking over Alaska where if we're going to freeze our behinds off, it's probably because there's blocking over Alaska. And we briefly got it in February, and Texas froze literally. A very impressive cold shot, but that was about it until April, where we got a little bit more Alaskan blocking. And yeah, so we had the stormy pattern from the Greenland blocking and the cold pattern from the Alaskan blocking. And even though it was April, between the two, it was enough. And it was not just like, a spot like New England, like Boston does average, I want to say, an inch or two of snow in April. So even though it feels uncommon, it can certainly snow in New England in April. But wow, Indianapolis, easily their biggest snow that late in the season, on record, I think. Same with like Columbus and Cincinnati. I mean, like Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Columbus, they got like 3-4 inches of snow, and it was what, April 23rd, I want to say, somewhere around there.
I think it was somewhere around
Or
there.
yeah, or the 21st and 22nd, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I mean, that was really late in the season. I mean, we had snow the 15th and the 16th here in the Northeast, and New England and elevation snows at that.
And some of those higher elevations in New England got like 8-10 inches of snow, and it even snowed an inch down to the coast of Boston, and it briefly snowed hard enough to cover pavement at like 11 in the morning in April, even despite the sun angle. So that was an impressive system, especially for the higher elevations of New England, like you said. And then, like I said, that was, you know, a little bit rare for how much it was that late, but not unprecedented. But yeah, the Midwest, that was remarkable.
Yeah, and I'm just looking back at our winter summaries that we sent our clients, and it looks like a general 2 to 4 inches from Indianapolis, Cincinnati, Dayton, Columbus, basically all of those areas. That's pretty substantial on the 20th and 21st
Yeah,
of
and
April.
there were a lot of areas. I think Indianapolis might have been one, but also Toledo, like Northwest Ohio. It was their biggest snowstorm on record that late in the season, or one of them, one of the top couple. Cleveland got, spots in Cleveland got close to half a foot, which was their biggest snow that late since 2005. So again, this is not something that happens every couple of years. That in the Midwest was definitely one of the biggest on record so late in the season, after almost nothing for almost 2 months.
Well, I think that about wraps this up for the past winter. So while I got you here, Jim, how about next winter? What do you think?
Uh,
I'm just joking.
I do have my thoughts. I don't know if I want to share them though, because they're probably, accuracy this far out is a little bit sketchy to say the least. But I do have my thoughts, so we'll start putting them on paper, like I said, in not too long, a few months.
Yeah, so you see that here in late spring, heading into early summer, Jim is already thinking about the next winter. So it's a long process of analyzing the entire atmosphere here.
For sure.
So, Jim, thanks a lot for coming out to the podcast. I know you've been here for a long range episode for the winter and then the midwinter update, and you kind of pop in from time to time. I do enjoy when you come onto our show, and I'm sure our listeners out there do too.
For sure. Yeah, no, it's definitely a fun format to talk about all this stuff.
But that's it for our podcast for this week. And thank you, everybody, for listening and joining us. Remember, you can always find WeatherWorks on social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. Wherever there's a social media channel, we're on it. We haven't gotten into TikTok yet, though. What do you think about that, Jim? TikTok?
I do have a TikTok, if that means anything. I don't publish my own content, but I'd love to see WeatherWorks on there. I don't know. Might not be up to me though.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we get some people like making some silly dances. I'm not sure, but that's something for another day. But yeah, find us on those station or on those channels there. Search WeatherWorks, and you can find this podcast, the Weather Lounge, on anywhere you can get your podcast. Just search the Weather Lounge; you'll certainly find us. And also, if you have any suggestions for the show or suggestions for guests, you can give us an email, weatherlounge@weatherworksinc.com. Until 2 more weeks, I think we'll have another episode coming out. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you then.